Reddit, how did you make money as a teen? Write in the comments what you think about it, how your life has changed. Enjoy the show. Story 1 Age 11. I used to get up at 0500 HRS and ride my push bike down to the local newspaper shop in Yarralumla in Canberra in the middle of winter and sort newspapers into stacks to be rolled so that they could be thrown out of a moving car onto people's front lawn. I came from a wealthy family. We didn't need the money. Years later, I found out that it was my father's plan, because he thought that I needed to become a bit more grounded. Story 2. I made a website and used a JavaScript nested in an iframe to preload a click on the banner advertisement that paid me 17 cents per click for my 52 unique visitors per day one summer. Dude in Portugal mailed me crisp 20s in an envelope for 2 months before he found out what I was doing. It got me school clothes. Then the internet changed. Maybe because shitter kids were abusing ad companies? 1998. Better times. Story 3. Mow lawns, shovel driveways, trim bushes, general yard work. I made the money too. Buy a lawnmower in the first place by using my allowance to buy a wagon, cooler, and pop soda in bulk and sell at ballparks and events near my house. I started when I was age 10. I hired my cousin and he also started mowing lawns with me at some point because I had too much work. Story 4. When I was a kid, before becoming a teen, I would clean people's homes or cars, fix electronics, speakers, etc. By the time I was a teen, I could do full repairs on most appliances from a TV or microwave to ovens and stovetops, water heaters, even lawnmowers. Everybody knew it was way cheaper to pay me to take a crack at it than it was to pay a professional. And in rare cases where I knew I was in over my head, I'd give back half the money and we'd be good. When I was 15, I got my first real job working at a grocery store. Hated that and left to work at GameStop. Was there when they bought EB Games and rebranded them, and managed to do repairs on the side. I applied to Costco on my 18th birthday and started working there a couple of weeks later. I've pretty much worked or had some way to earn money ever since I was a child. Story 5. I got my first job at 12 or 13. My mom got me a job at the flower nursery she worked at. I mostly just watered plants, helped load, unload stuff, shoveled snow, etc. I was probably making sub-minimum wage, but it was whatever since I was 12 and I could walk there easily. There was a Dunkin' Donuts next door that gave us all discounts, so my taste for coffee only got worse there. After that, I worked odd jobs for a bit. I was a paintball referee. They paid me mostly in paint and field fees. I think I did get paid cash, but I'd immediately spend it on stuff for my marker and more paint. That was just for a summer and fall. Then the field shut down because the owner didn't pay his taxes. I did small projects at a wildlife refuge. I was supposed to be volunteering for school, but the owner-operator paid me to assemble enclosures and go on visits with snakes since I was knowledgeable. She also paid me and another volunteer to come in during snowstorms to help clear out since we were reliable and had 4x4s. Eventually, the cost to drive out there was too much and I had to step back. I worked for a neighbor doing yard work one summer. Her husband died a few years prior, and I guess my mom volunteered me to help out. She paid really well, but was also needlessly dramatic about everything. I got to mid-July before I started looking for another job. When I was 17 or so, I got a job at a charity art and antique consignment shop at a dying shopping mall. My girlfriend at the time was working there and got me a job. It was all right, I guess. It was general retail, but we didn't really sell much, so we were never busy. I didn't live too far from the mall, so I closed a lot, which let me tell you, nothing is more dead than a dying mall at 10 p.m. on a Thursday. I left when I went to college. Early in college, I worked at an RV dealership one summer. Pay as may, but I got to do deliveries. LOL, who lets a 19-year-old drive a Class A to Bonnaroo? And the finance department seemed to be entirely staffed by college girls from Virginia Tech. I occasionally got the drive cars to other dealerships as well, which was a fun way to eat up an 8-hour workday and get paid time and a half. That was a timed, contracted position, so it ended in late August. And then I turned 21 and apparently was ready for a big boy job after that, I guess. Story 6. I chopped wood, cleaned chicken coops, hauled hay, mowed lawns, loaded pallets on a sod farm, raised and sold vegetables, pigs and steers, trained horses, and often went dumpster diving for aluminum cans and other metals that could be recycled, or clothes that could be worn. We were extremely poor when I was a kid. It was what I had to do so my brother and I could eat. Luckily, tomato soup was only 25 cents per can back then. Story 7. Myself, my grandmother. We got an allowance a few times a month for being good grandchildren. Absolutely loved that woman. We also got an allowance around the house for doing chores. My friend punched out the front panels of computers at school, stole the RAM, sold them to other kids, spent the money on fish and chips for lunch for us, my coworker, modded Nintendo Wiis for kids at school, made a good chunk too. A rich kid I knew from school, his parents owned a successful business, florist. He got $50 a week for making his bed. That's it. Story 8. I built shockers out of disposable cameras and sold them at school. I had a steady supply from the Rite Aid down the street, and eventually from several other stores we visited regularly. They all had photo labs, and eventually got it down to a nearly assembly line process. This was pre-9/11, pre-Columbine, so the most I got was a, "That's not appropriate for school" from one teacher. I think one of science teachers got their hands on one too. Story 9. I'm just old enough that I got a paper route at 13 just as they were starting to die off a bit. I would wake up at like 6 a.m., had to fold and rubber band about 50 newspapers, then bring them in a cart to a few blocks nearby in my Queens neighborhood. I also had to do the route once a week to get paid by the customers, which sucked. Between getting paid by the company and tips, I was making anywhere from $30 to $50 per week. For a 13-year-old, I was rich. Story 10. Age 13 in 2002, was a moderator of a PC overclocking forum. I had built several PCs and was obsessed with hardware. Most of the forum admin were based in the UK, and since I was the only one in the US, where the hardware companies are based, they sent me free hardware to review. After reviewing it, I'd sell it on eBay. This eventually led to me exporting US-made tech and phase change cooling equipment to one of the website admins who was reselling it in the UK. Age 15 to 17, ran a relatively successful MySpace layouts website that pulled in $6K/MO in ad revenue at its peak. Felt almost like an unlimited money life hack at that age. Eventually sold the site in late 2007 as MySpace was starting to die. Story 11. I was a teen in the late 90s. While I eventually got an actual job working at a Crystal, for the most part it was just various hustles. We lived near a golf course, and I got permission to dive into the water hazards to fish up lost stuff. I even rigged up a floating snorkel tube so I could stay down longer, though the hazards weren't any more than about 10 feet deep. Anything I found, I kept. Mostly this was old golf balls, which I sold for 50 CA piece or 3 for $1. Other things I found were cell phones, golf clubs, and once a watch. It was a Rolex that I later learned was counterfeit. My dad still has it. Other times, I'd just push a lawnmower around the neighborhood with a gas can on it, and just ask to mow people's yards for them. Lawns in the neighborhood were pretty small, so I could completely mow one in about half an hour, and generally got $10, $15 for it. One afternoon I made $200. This kept me in video games and blue hair dye until I graduated high school. Story 12. Honestly, I worked a lot as a teen. Retail, house-sitting, dog-walking, babysitting, etc., and saved over $10K by the time I was barely 19. If I hadn't been caught in a negative relationship for 2 years, I could have saved even more. The month after I met my savings goal, I had to replace my vehicle. With new adult expenses, namely college, which I refused to go into debt for, so it took me 5.5 years while working the whole time. It took me years to build it back up, but I am still so thankful I worked and had that money when I needed it as a teenager. Story 13. I started in 9th grade working for $3/hour for this lady from church. I guess you could say I was her handyman. I'd mow the lawn, gardening, pull weeds. I'd also babysit her 3 boys. The youngest still wasn't quite potty trained, so I had to clean him up. I'd wash a mountain of dishes, vacuum their house, which was filthy, do and fold the boys' laundry. Basically, I did everything she didn't want to do. She had a PT job, and her husband was active duty military. Nice family, dirty kids, dirty house, until I cleaned it for them. After word spread, I got calls from others, but I was only willing to babysit since it was more chill than washing dishes. Story 14. For me as a teenager, I did babysitting starting at age 12, 14. Lots of it. Poorly paid. I did lawn mowing. I didn't like it, but it paid a lot better than babysitting. I also got a job digging ditches, which, again, paid well, but was sweaty, laborious work. At 15, I got a job at a seamstress place, sewing on buttons and pinning items and ironing. I was helping the real seamstress, and she just trained me to do more and more the longer I worked there. I enjoyed it and learned a lot, but the pay was pretty awful. At 16, I worked at a pea factory, first on the assembly line and then in the lab grading peas for packaging to different companies. Jolly Green Giant, Kroger, Albertsons, they all came off the same assembly line. This paid okay at $6, 50 large jar, but I made a lot of money solely, in my 16-year-old brain, because they'd have me work 60 hours a week in the summer, and the overtime pay was great past 40 hours. Plus, paychecks with 60 hours week were the most money I'd ever seen. My highest paid per hour gigs were computer jobs. I built computers for people, set up servers, and made websites for companies. This was in the 90s when everyone was first starting to get websites, and there was a lot of demand and nobody knew how to do it. I read some books from the library and figured it out at home. So I was making $15/HR when minimum wage was $5, $15 doing computer work. Only problem was, I didn't have good marketing and didn't work for an actual company. This was just me telling people and making websites for my neighbors and friends, parents, and people at church who owned companies that wanted websites. So I wanted to do lots more computer work, but I couldn't get enough hours because this was just me by myself from 15. 18, so I did work as I found it and through word of mouth. At 18, I got a job at Computer City, now gone out of business many years ago, in customer service. That was great with my computer gig because I got an employee discount at the store, and I learned more about computers from the sales guys in their fix-it area in the back. Then, still 18, I got hired by a manufacturing company as their first ever IT person. They were using typewriters in customer service and shipping department. A company of 40 employees in the 90s, so I got them set up with a server and computers for their office employees. I also taught them how to use the computers. I was 18/19, and these were mostly people 30-40 plus, but they had no clue about computers. I was getting a paid salary now at $20/hour plus great benefits and $401K. So it was a right time, right place opportunity. And once I had that on my resume, I was able to get jobs at other companies and got promoted a bunch and earned good money. Story 15. I joined a program that was offered at my school at the end of my sophomore year that was going to take place the following school year called YES, Youth Education Security. You had to write in an essay about why you think you should join the program and your plans for the future. I think there were only about 12 slots available, and I was one that was picked. For my junior and senior year, all I had to do was show up to school and get A's or B's in all my classes, something I was already doing anyway, and they paid us $50 every 2 weeks for doing so. It wasn't much, but it was pretty cool, and I used the money to occasionally buy new clothes or video games. Story 16. Started working at 12 doing babysitting, office work, filing, shredding, yard work, walking dogs, caring for farm animals, selling farm eggs, recycling cans, washing cars, selling sewn goods and baked goods at church sales. When I was old enough for a work permit, I worked as a cashier at a department store along with my side jobs. After high school, I got a full-time job in a window shop doing the back office and estimating window and screen prices until I graduated college and got my grown-up job. Also did the office work on the side, with a few extra responsibilities now that I didn't sound like a child on the phone. I did freelance IT support and organizing as well. Story 17, selling cars on Craigslist. Before Facebook Marketplace, the place to find a car locally was Craigslist. Saying it was popular in the 2010s would be an understatement. Once sold a car after only being listed for 30 minutes. Method was simple. First, find a car on the side of the road with a for sale sign. After buying, I would clean it inside and out, replace anything that it needed, light bulbs / battery / wiper blades, then list it. After selling it, start it all over. A car on the side of the road with a for sale sign is a limited market. Low demand means you get it for a good price. Clean it up a little, increase price relative to similar models, list it to the larger online market and prepare to be bombarded with messages. It was good while it lasted. As the years went by, all the reality TV shows involving cars ruined the market. They would show a car being bought one day, then sold for twice as much the next day without anything being done to it. Obviously BS to make the host look savvy, but people believed it. Completely ruined any form of trust. Now people selling a car are convinced the buyer is trying to rip them off, and vice versa. Story 18. My teen got a job at scout camp for the summer. You don't even have to be a scout to be hired. They're always looking for staff. He's having a blast, spending 9 weeks at a Scouts BSA camp. On his days off, he plays games with the other teen staff, or they go into town to bowl, or go to the beach, or out to eat together. They inner tube down the river, go kayaking, ride ATVs. Staff gets to do it all for free in their time off. He loves the job, though. He's working with youth who are excited to be at camp. He actually is a scout, so this is right up his alley, and he feels like he's got the best job in the world. Plus, they feed him 3 meals a day, and he gets to live there, so it's the most independence freedom he's had so far. He's 15. They have laundry machines on site that staff use to do their laundry each week. He'll come home with a few $1,000s. They direct deposit his paycheck every week into his bank account. There's a tree climbers activity place near us that he used to love, and he thought that would be a really fun job to work there. But as he got old enough, he grew too tall and the place wasn't fun for him anymore. I think he's onto something by finding a job he really enjoys, so he can do the fun things and have social time. He works as a lifeguard, so he's by the lake a lot, and teaches kids swimming, which the camp taught him to do during training week, and it's his favorite part of the job. If you're looking for something more lucrative, his friend is a golf caddy. Gets paid well and gets great tips, but he spends his time carrying golf bags around in the heat and spending time with boring old men who like to gab a lot. Story 19. In the 1970s, I found a place that tore apart old mainframe computer systems in the inner city and then sold the parts for cheap as part of a tax shelter arrangement to give jobs to inner city kids. Companies would trade in their machines and would include brand new computer tapes that they hadn't used. They were sold for parts for 15 cents. Universities were still using the old computer tapes and were paying $22 for each tape. So I'd buy brand new tapes for 15 cents and turned around and sold them for $18. I was doing about $450 a week for about 2 hours of work. Modern day equivalent of about $1,000 per week for about 15 weeks during the school year. Lasted about 3 years until Ethernet was invented. Paid my tuition, room and board to an Ivy League school, which was about $7,500 per year. Good times. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like it. Be sure to write comments and share your stories.